I've used Cursor for well over 400 hours. I've built my entire startup with Cursor, and I've interviewed some of the best Cursor devs on the planet. I'm going to compress 400 hours of raw Cursor knowledge into this one video. Real quick, I'm hiring a developer to help me build Vectel. So if you have full stack experience and want to join the team, the link is going to be below the video. All right, so the first thing you have to do when you get Cursor is to create a .cursor rules file. First, you need to go into the Cursor settings and make sure right here you have this ticked on. Once you have that, create the file in the root of your project and include some essential information. So if you want Cursor to actually treat this as a markdown file, just go to the bottom right corner, click on plain text and type in markdown. So the first section you need to include is the project overview. Here is the vision of the project. Next, you want to have a section on the personality that you want Cursor to have. So for example, it could be like, teach me like a senior developer would. Then tech stack, this is very important. In here, you want to include your front end, your back end, your database, all the technical information about your project. Here, these two are actually optional. These are processes. Any set of instructions that you find yourself repeating that is related to building, to coding, make sure to create a process for it, right? So it could be like, step 1, explain the error in simple terms. Step 2, write 3 paragraphs, and so on, right? And then you can just reference, follow the error fixing process, and it will know what to do. Now, here, you put in your environment variables, right? The reason why you need to put this here, because hopefully you have a second file, which is .cursor ignore. In here, you can put in your environment variables so that Chat and Composer doesn't accidentally rewrite them. The downside of that is that you need to mention what is in the environment files in your Cursor rules file. Otherwise, Cursor has no clue what env files you have and where. Current file structure. So you can use this tree command, brew tree, to get the file structure. Obviously, you can here, this is what it should ignore, and just paste it in here. No matter if it's like 100 lines, paste it in here. Again, this is another process similar to this, GitHub push, but I think this one all of you should have. Essentially, anytime you want to push to GitHub, you just tell it, okay, check what branch we're on, make sure to switch to the current branch and push it with a clear commit message. If you push to GitHub 10 times a day, this saves you so much time. This is an important section. So in here, you repeat the most important instructions from anywhere of the Cursor file. If there is a very important instruction, repeat it. Repeat it in the middle, at the start, at the end. Other context, just, for any other information that you may want to include in the Cursor rules file. And then comments. In here, you highlight the importance of writing comments. So make sure to always include comments in your code. Cursor rules file, super important, and you should be updating it every day. All right, the next thing you have to know about is Repo Prompt. Now, this actually isn't Cursor native tool, but it's a tool that you can get, and I'm going to link it below in the description, where you can select a folder. So for instance, here, I'm going to select this code base, and it loads your entire code base into here, so you can select it. And then, let's say you write a prompt like, find the front-end bug that's bothering me, blah, blah, blah. This, at the bottom, you can see approximately 4.4 thousand tokens. What this allows you to do is put all of the context in here, so that when you're using, Claude or ChatGPT Pro mode, you can put your entire code base into a single prompt and have the AI models respond a lot more accurately and reliably. So this tool is actually still in testing, so not many people know about it, but it is a huge hack that you should definitely know about. Okay, so which AI models should you use inside of Cursor? Let me show you. So go into Cursor, click on Settings, and then Cursor Settings, and click on Models. So the most essential by far is the new Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Make sure it's the one 1022. This is the new one. It has to end with 1022. You can keep all of these unchecked. Now these are, I think, the best models from Gemini right now. So enable these. Then GPT-4o, this is just, for in case Anthropic API is acting up. And then for reasoning models, O1 and O1 Mini. Personally, I use the new Sonnet like 99% of the time. You might find that if Sonnet is stuck on something, one of the other models might solve it. So that's why you want to have these models enabled. But by default, make sure you have Sonnet enabled, and make sure you also have it when you're using, for example, the terminal, right? In here, you can also choose the model. Or even, let's say, you're like rewriting something with Command K, you can choose the model in here as well. So make sure you select it everywhere. Okay, so prompting techniques. This is very interesting, and you get better at it every week. So let me get into it. These are the most important ones. So the fewer lines of code, the better. This one I use so many times. So let's say you're using the Composer and you want to write a new function or, refactor some code, whatever. If you just tell it to do that, it often tries to impress you. It tries to do like a very advanced implementation of that for no reason. But if you say the fewer lines of code, the better, it writes a much more clean and minimal code that is not full of unnecessary lines. So just by including this simple sentence at the end of your prompts, you will save yourself a lot of headache. Another prompt I used all the time is proceed like a senior developer or proceed like a 10x engineer. Now this one, it's good old prompt engineering 101. Now this one is interesting, and this one I actually discovered recently. do not stop working until you've implemented this feature fully and completely. This reduces the laziness of the models a lot. Because sometimes, let's say you're doing a change and it requires like 4 stages, it might just do like 2 of them or 3 of them and say, would you like me to proceed with the last stage? All of us hate that, let's be honest. So try it and see for yourself. Reasoning paragraphs, this one is very important. So let's say you're stuck on an error, right? Let's say there is like a random error in this code. Maybe instead of try, there is like dry or something, right? And there's an error and you can't fix it and it's like complicated. Obviously, this is a bad example, but you get my point, right? So you load the entire thing into the composer, you tag it, we have an error in AI agent. Always make sure to tag the relevant file. And then say, start by writing 3 reasoning paragraphs analyzing what the error might be. Do not jump to conclusions. This is huge. If you do not include that, it will say, oh, now I see the error. And that's not a problem with simple errors, such as this one, but for more complex error, that is a huge problem. Because once it says, oh, I see the issue now, then it is stuck in that like wrong direction. Because the way LLMs work, they predict the next token, right? If it starts by saying it's certain that it knows the error, you're done. So if you include this, it will start by writing 3 paragraphs before it actually starts changing your code, which greatly improves the likelihood that it found the right thing. So that's why forcing it to write like 3 reasoning paragraphs with big changes or with errors is huge. Answer in short, this is obvious. A lot of the times the models like to be very verbose, so having just answer in short saves so much time. Do not delete comments, self-explanatory. The models have a tendency to delete comments. And then summary of current state. This one is interesting. So this one is more towards Claude, to be honest, and I'm going to explain in a bit when you should use Claude instead of Cursor. But the situation in which you would use the summary of the recent comments is, let's say there's been a very long composer and you want to switch to a new one, which, by the way, let me just touch on that right now. When to switch to a new composer? You should switch when you start seeing like weird things, right? Weird behaviors. When the composer suddenly like mentions something that's completely unrelated or forgets a key piece of information. What that means is that the context window is overloaded. There's too much code, too many files referenced. It's time to switch to a new composer. However, the issue with switching to a new composer is that you lose essential context that you were building in this one. That's where summary of contents comes into play, and that's where I wrote this prompt. So it's the summary of current state. Before we proceed, I need you to give me a summary of the current state, and feel free to pause and just copy it. By the way, if you want access to all of my prompts, they're all in the new society. So if you go into the new society, in the classroom, templates and presets, you can get all of my system prompts, instructions, as well as all of my AI agents, automations, and the code for my videos. So if you're not in the new society, make sure to join. It's a no-brainer. But in the prompts and instructions in here, you can literally see my cursor rules file, cursor system prompt, and all the other stuff that you might need. So if you want any of that, make sure to join the new society. It's going to be linked below. Anyways, here's this prompt, summary of current state. So feel free to pause and take it. But basically, it summarizes the important stuff as if it was like a senior developer telling another programmer, see here, anything else a programmer might need to work on this project, describe what we just did, what did not work, which files were updated, stuff like that. This is huge. Do not include any assumptions or theories, just the facts. So as you can tell, this prompt will summarize the important information from a composer that you can just take away into a new composer without having to start completely from scratch. It's huge. I use it at least once or twice a day, every day. Another prompt you should be aware of is the unbiased 50-50. Here's what it looks like. Before you answer, I want you to write 2 detailed paragraphs, one arguing for each of these solutions. So let's say you have like 2 possible paths going forward, right? Or like 2 ways to solve a problem, and you're not sure which one is better. The issue is that Claude likes to be a yes man. Anything that it senses like, oh, the user wants this, it suddenly says, oh, you're right, we should do that. Unless it's like violating some best practices principle. In most cases, it will be a complete yes man, and it will just agree with you. Or if you don't express any opinion, it will agree with its previous thoughts, which again, it's next token prediction. So this prompt forces it to break that pattern and actually analyze both possible solutions. And the important stuff is here. Do not jump to conclusions. Seriously consider both approaches. Then, after you finish, tell me which one of these solutions is obviously better than the other and why. This is very important because otherwise it will literally say recommended when it's running the first solution. And it's over. Like if it says that in the first 5% or the first 10% of its response, the remaining 90% of its response is useless. Why? Because it's already committed to one of these solutions. You have to tell it, do not jump to conclusions, consider both approaches. And then after it writes both of these paragraphs, then it says which one is better. Another prompt you need to start using is a properly formatted search query. So there is like some, web feature inside of Cursor, like add web or something. What is O3? Personally, I've never used it. I think it works decently good probably. Seems to be kind of slow. Yeah, it is very slow. Okay, wow, that was very slow. And yeah, anyways, so not only is this very slow, it's also nowhere as good as Perplexity, right? So what you want to do is you want to use this prompt, which I optimized. It's a 1-paragraph search query which tells it how to prompt Perplexity, because normally it formats the prompts as if it was using Google. It's crazy, I know, even AI models don't know how to use AI models, but you have to tell it, your task is to write a 1-paragraph search query as if you were telling a human researcher what to find, including all the relevant context. Format the paragraph as clear instructions, commanding a researcher to find what we're looking for. Ask for code snippets or technical details when relevant. Then it writes this instruction, and you can paste this into Perplexity or ChatGPT, which do have a better web search than Cursor, which allows you to find like the latest documentation, or let's say there's an error, you're stuck on it, you don't know how to proceed. It's good to just do a web search, right? So anytime you're stuck or you want to do a web search, say, okay, we have this error, and then you paste in this prompt, whatever the outcome is, let's say like a paragraph like this, you go into Perplexity, just paste it in, you go into ChatGPT, paste it in as well, copy both of these results, put them back into Cursor, works like magic. Now this prompt, this is a work of beauty. I mean, man, this is just prompt engineering perfection. So this one I actually discovered earlier today when I was building a new feature inside of Vectel. By the way, if you don't use Vectel, what are you doing? It's the future of productivity. And literally OpenAI is trying to put me out of business. They just announced ChatGPT tasks, which literally is what I've been talking about for the past 3 or 4 months, that this is going to exist. There is going to be an AI-powered productivity tool with built-in AI agents running in the background. And, people are like, oh my God, David, it's just another Todoist. Well, what about now? Now that OpenAI is adding it, it clearly proves that I was right. And this is literally like David versus Goliath. Like, I'm solo developer. I'm literally hiring for my first developer. And now $180 billion company is trying to do the same thing. So again, if you don't use Vectel, just go to Vectel.ai. And tomorrow I'm adding a new feature called Notes, which lets you use Vectel beyond just tasks. So anything that's not a task, such as a note, a reminder, an idea, a random thought, anything that you want to write down will be able to be used inside of Vectel. Anyways, this is the prompt I discovered earlier today when I was building one of my AI agents for Vectel. And it counteracts what I just described, where if the AI models start confidently, it's over. They will not be objective because they already committed to one solution. This is like worded so beautifully. So you should start the reasoning paragraph with lots of uncertainty and slowly gain confidence as you think about the item more. One example where you might use this is if you're building some AI agents and you want to have like a system prompt, right? A good thing you should do in your system prompts is force the AI model to first start with reasoning. So let's say you're forcing it to like output a JSON, right? Instead of just doing the fields you want, do one more field at the start called reasoning and include this exact prompt. That way, the AI model is forced to think about what it will do before it does it. Trust me, it improves the reliability and performance a lot. And these are just a few of the prompting techniques I use on a day-to-day basis. If you want to get really good at prompt engineering, we have an advanced prompt engineering workshop in the New Society in the classroom. Under advanced AI tutorials, there's 8 dedicated modules that'll teach you everything you need to know about prompt engineering. Plus, if you want to learn more about Cursor, we have nearly 200 posts about how to use Cursor, how others are using it, tips, tricks, mistakes, whatever you might need. So make sure to join New Society. It's linked below. Okay, so here is how to structure your prompts when actually building. Honestly, it can change, but this is pretty good for most situations. So first you explain what you're doing in like 2 to 4 sentences, right? Then you tag the relevant files. This is huge because if you don't do it, it gets distracted. Another thing is that sometimes if you're building like a longer composer, the files at the top are not the ones that should be referenced. Basically, do not reference files that are not immediately relevant to this operation. Then how to execute, what not to do. So like any like instructions on how it should be done, like, think like a senior developer, or only change that function. Do not touch anything else. Then this is context dump. So here you would include like, for example, documentation from the web or anything else it should know, just like raw, fully include everything. And then also in terms of prompt engineering, you should do like these 4. This is called a delimiter. And I've learned this from Greg Brockman, watching his TED Talk, who is the co-founder of OpenAI. But basically, it lets the LLM like see, okay, this is a break. So whatever is coming up next, like pay a bit more attention, right? Like it's separate from what came before. So here you repeat the core instruction, which is basically this. And again, one of the best things for prompt engineering is to repeat the most important stuff. So make sure to do this in your like daily prompts, because when you do a long context dump, it'll often forget, and whatever is last is super important. So here you would repeat your core instruction and then do output format. So like answer in short, or like do not write any code, answer in short, or be very thorough, include lots of comments. Whatever you want, depends on the use case obviously, but this prompt format is pretty solid for most situations. Creating specialized MD files. This is huge for, let's say, like your database setup, right? So look at my folder structure. I have a backend, front end. Now, once your code base gets long enough, you should try to split these. Obviously, it matters what files are attached, but you should like, let's say, you should have a separate cursor workflow for backend and front end. Again, once your project gets big enough, not at the start. But what you should have definitely is a folder, instructions or prompts or whatever, where you have specialized MD files, markdown files, such as supabase.md or whatever database you have. Could be named database setup.md, right? And here you include everything. Your table structure, how many tables you have, your RLS policies, what fields you have, which fields are mandatory, like what is the defaults, which fields can be nullable, the SQL queries you use to create them, like anything relevant to this database that is absolutely essential to know about working with your database should be in this file. But anytime you're doing anything related to the database, you can just tag this file, right? So for example, I can go here and I can do boom, tag, supabase MD, and suddenly the LLM, which is in this case is the new Sonnet 3.5, it knows all it needs to know because I tagged in my file, which is properly documented. Basically, it's like internal documentation for each part. So you would do this for database for sure, then also like design principles, right? Like UI and UX principles for your front end. Like basically anything that you find yourself repeating that isn't like a single prompt, that's more of an entire file, create an MD file for that and just tag it anytime you need it referenced. All right, so the next step, speaking versus typing. A lot of you are super slow at typing. Personally, I'm like in the top 0.5%. I'm like 120 words per minute, but still that is slower than speaking. So what you need to get absolutely is WhisperFlow. This is a free AI tool. And actually even the pro version is free. I don't know how it works exactly, but this allows you to speak. Now this is incorrect. I don't know how they calculate this, but this is definitely incorrect. When you speak, you're at least 200 words per minute, probably like 250. And you can even show it now. So now I activated it and you can just speak your prompts, right? So you can say like, okay, and we need to update our AI agent Python file so that we call the Anthropic API, then it goes into the OpenAI API, it parses the JSON that's outputted by AI agent, and we restore that into a dedicated JSON file. I could not type that fast, no way. But with this tool, you can just send this, and anytime you wanna like brain dump, it's huge, right? Obviously, there's a situation where you still wanna type. There's situations where you don't have, where maybe you're in public and you cannot speak. Sure, that's fine. But when you wanna like really give it all instructions and like you have a complex ideas, lots of ideas, and it relates to another file, this and that, and you wanna just get it out of your brain as fast as possible, having this tool called Flow Voice, aka WhisperFlow, is huge. And again, I'm gonna link it below the video, but no matter how fast, like unless you're literally one of the world's fastest typists, and you type at like 200 words per minute, which if you're watching this, shout out to you. But the vast majority of us cannot type nowhere near as fast as we can speak. So definitely get this tool. Comments. Writing comments is obviously important. Any programmer, even beginners know that, but comments for when working with AI tools such as Cursor are becoming more and more important. The reason for that is because humans write less and less of the code, meaning the comments, like for example here, right? Let me open a Python file. Okay, here like adding like 2 lines of comments explaining what this function does is huge. And especially the more complicated your code base becomes. Why? Because in the future, 100% of the coding will be done by AI, and all we will be doing is just like tagging relevant files, right? And if the file is the same idea as with the database documenting everything here, if the file has enough comments and it explains like the purpose of this file, why it exists, which other files reference it, how the functions should be used, the vision behind it, which functions are used by, most of the time. Like you cannot imagine when it might be useful. Now it goes without saying, do not put irrelevant, useless stuff in the comments, right? Because that would confuse the AI agents. But whatever amount of comments you're writing is probably not enough. You should seriously be writing like one line of comments for each 3 or 4 lines of code. Yeah, this should be the amount that you're aiming for. Something like this, where literally like 20 to 30% of it is green, maybe even like 40%. Again, depends on the complexity, right? And if you have like descriptions and prompts that are obvious, that are in plain text, then you don't need to add comments there. But for most code, you should be adding a lot more comments. And again, this is like thinking forward into the future. Currently, it might not seem as important, but in the future, all that will matter is an AI model looking at the file and how quickly it can understand it and understand its relevance within the code base. And you can achieve that by adding a shit ton of comments. Telling the AI, explain your thought process in the comments. Make sure to explain all the non-obvious parts in the comments. Trust me, this is like a long-term play that will make a huge difference in the next 1 or 2 years. It might not pay off right now, but if you start doing this right now, you will see like when we have much more advanced AI that takes care of the coding completely, it will pay off. Trust me on that. Okay, avoid technical debt at all costs. This one might sound stupid. It's like, of course, David, of course I want to avoid technical debt. But see, what you don't understand is that after all, AI is not perfect. Again, maybe in 2 or 3 years it will be, but right now it's not perfect. So you, the founder, the developer, you should still be learning a lot. And that's another mistake that a lot of beginners make. They outsource everything to AI and then like refuse to learn. That's one of the worst mindsets you can have. Always make sure to learn. Even if the AI is doing like most of the coding, you're still going to be bottlenecked by your skill level. So let's say you have like a skill level like this. The AI maybe can do this. If you improve your skill level to this, the AI can suddenly do this because you can understand, okay, this is how the files are related. You can look at maybe before you approve something like, oh, this is problematic, we will run into errors and problems in the future. How much you can get out of AI is inherently limited by how good you are. So you should absolutely try to improve your code understanding and your abstraction and your logic. So that's why you should avoid technical debt. Instead, you should try to learn more and only implement the stuff that you understand. If you suddenly have the AI create 5 new files, each one being like 200, 300 lines of code, and you don't understand any of it, good luck building anything meaningful, because you're going to run into so many issues. Like, you're going to be stuck on errors for days, and you don't know what's happening, you don't know where the issue is, and you don't even know how to get started moving in the right direction. Why? It's because you were not focused on your own skill level, you were not improving your level, and then your AI can only do so much, because again, it is great at implementing like a single feature, but it's not great at like having a vision for a product, especially if you want to like do your own startup, launch it to the public, have a consumer facing app with front end, back end, database, everything. You need to avoid technical debt. Otherwise, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot and maybe in the head as well. All right, so when should you use Claude instead of Cursor? Personally, my setup uses both for very different purposes. Claude I use as an advisor / consultant on the project. So here is where I would like brainstorm, okay, do we add this feature? How do we add this feature? What does this look like? What is the next step? While in Cursor, I'm actually implementing it. Now, if you want to use Cursor only, you can obviously use chat for those purposes. The issue is that once it starts loading tons of code, it can get overfilled as well. And it's also just good to have like a dedicated project inside of Claude. So I have a Vector AI right here, and it knows everything. It's basically like very similar to my Cursor rules. So it knows everything about this. And it's totally separate from Cursor. So I don't have to worry about like, okay, did I tag too much? Is this being influenced by some files? This you can have completely separate and have it more unbiased, have it less influenced by the current code, and only feed in the files that it's truly needed. So use Cursor as your programmer, use Claude as your advisor / consultant. That is the setup that works for me the best. Putting names at the, this is super simple, but you need to do it. So let's say, okay, in here, I would literally just do like the name of the file at the top. Again, the reason for this is AI. You have to think into the future. Coding is changing. AI agents, AI models will be doing all the coding in the future. By putting the name of the file at the top, and especially location, right? So for example, in here, AI agent. So what I should have done, I should have put backend / AI agent. So let's say you have like 4 different folder structures, right? Backend / service / whatever, and then you have the file. Or in front end, it's even more important, like app / utils / of page.tsx. Especially if you're using like Node.js, right? Or Next.js, you might have lots of page.tsx files. So it's essential to know which one is it. By putting the exact location of the file, including which folders it is, you will give that context at the start of, like, anytime you tag the file, the AI will know that this is it. And especially if you like copy paste it into Claude, it will not have the knowledge that Cursor has. So maybe Cursor would know where it is, but Claude wouldn't. So make sure to just, this is like a simple habit, but put the exact location of each file at the top as a comment. It never hurts and only has benefits. Okay, so we already talked about when to create a new composer. Now, when do you use chat? Again, this is more of a taste situation, but Cursor makes it pretty simple. You use chat when you need to ask it something. Use composer when you want it to make changes. So let's say I was like, okay, which fonts are we using in our front end? List out all the fonts. Or which exact colors did we reference in this component? List them all out. And it will do that, right? That's where you should use chat. Composer, you should use for complex changes, and especially in the agent mode. If you use agent, it can do a lot more. As it says, agent composer can use tools, run terminal commands, and edit files. Basically, it can save you even more time. But let's say there's a large change that involves multiple files, which on average, I would not recommend you to do, but sometimes you might want to send it like, okay, let's see if it works. Right? Let's see if it works. Maybe there's like only 5% chance. If it works, it saves you multiple hours. If it doesn't, no big deal. You can just split it into parts and go one by one. Basically, always use agent. I mean, normal is like more predictable, I guess, but I don't really see any benefit of not using it. So I would definitely suggest you use agent, and most of the time just stay in composer, stay in agent, use Claude for consulting. If you need some like knowledge, and this is very good at analyzing the entire code base, then use chat. But in here, I'm always switched to agent. No need to switch back to normal. All right, so we covered 2 points. Nice. Okay, docs feature. So this is another feature inside of Cursor that's not really that good, and this is the docs right here. So what you can do is like you can add a new doc, right? And you can put the link and reference docs easier. This feature is still not perfect. I don't know, maybe you can tell me, some of you guys in the comments, if you use it, but personally, if there's a docs file, let's say like a documentation or Anthropic, and I'm referencing it like every few days, much better thing you should do, just create an MD file for it. So you can like create a new file and say like OpenAI, or let's say token streaming. .md, right? Boom. And in here, you would paste in the entire contents of the relevant documentation. That way, if you need it in the future, you can just easily tag it. Now again, in theory, the docs feature in Cursor should achieve the exact same thing, but from experience, it's not as good. So maybe it will change, maybe it won't. When to use perplexity, we already covered that. Basically, anytime you need to use like the latest documentation, anytime you're stuck on an error for more than a few minutes, just do a web search. Use the prompt I gave you earlier to have Cursor format the web query, send it into Perplexity, send it into ChatGPT as well, copy both of these outputs, put them back into Cursor and tell it, give me the TLDR. Okay, this is another great prompt. So you tell it to, bro, I could make this video like every 2 months, because let me know if you want more of these like super in-depth videos, because when I'm working with Cursor, especially now that I'm building Vector as my main thing, I learn so much literally every day. So when you do the web results, right, you paste in it, boom, 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 it's a lot of context. You tell it, okay, give me the TLDR of the search results. But if you just do this, sometimes it gets distracted because the search results can have like, weird stuff. You need to say, be careful though. Often the search results contain dangerous and distracting red herrings. This is absolutely essential. This puts like the AI model on alert. It's like, okay, let's pay attention. A lot of this stuff might not be relevant to our issue. Let's say you're fixing an error, and some of it points you to like refactoring a different function. If you did not put this, the AI model might go in that wrong direction. Why? Because you just pasted in Perplexity and ChatGPT search results, which is like tons of context, and it's like getting overwhelmed by that wrong information. So if you put this towards the end, it's like, let's be careful here. There might be red herrings. It's like, okay, it basically makes it more focused and much less likely to get distracted. So this is a huge prompt. Anytime you want it to give you a summary of something, make sure to use this. All right, so this is actually a lesser known part of Cursor, and it's that there is a second way to do a system prompt that's not just Cursor rules. So Cursor rules is only specific to this current project. However, if you go into Cursor settings, there is rules for AI, and this is specific to anything, even like Command K sessions on any project. So no matter like if you switch, okay, from a side project to your job to, whatever else you're building for a client, let's say you have multiple different clients, right? You would need Cursor rules separate for each of them. But this is like general rules. And again, feel free to pause and just copy this. This is best practices. This should not reference anything specific to this project. is only general coding principles, right? Fundamental principles, keep files small and focus, error fixing, building process, include lots of comments, always write simple, clean, and modular code. Stuff that is good to do no matter which project you're in. Make sure to include it in here. And again, make sure to click this off. Otherwise, your cursor rules file will not work. Avoid huge refactors. This one is perhaps obvious, but let's say there is like a refactor that involves 4 different files. If you try to do it at once, again, you might try to like do a Hail Mary and like see, okay, let's see if it works or not. But if you want to do it properly and you sense like, okay, this is going to be a big change, instead of having it do that change, say, okay, break this down into the required steps. And another prompt that you should definitely use, only include the truly necessary steps. Because if you add that, it will not add optional stuff. If you do not include this prompt, it might add like nice to have like, error handling, details, now with formatting, parsing, debugging. It adds a lot of stuff that might not be necessary, right? So if you say only include the truly necessary steps, it's huge. Now, if you break down a huge refactor into 4 or 5 steps, that already is like magical what that can do. Because then you can tangle each step and say, okay, step 1 executed, looks good. Maybe you can even test it, which is amazing, right? If you can test it, say if it's good, if you're happy with it, you can push to GitHub, you can do a commit, and suddenly you have like 20% of the huge refactor finished. But if you try to do a huge refactor at once, and then like towards the end it runs to issues, or maybe it completes it, but then you do a test and it doesn't work and you're not sure why it doesn't work, you need to do it all over again. It's just like, it's much better if you just break it down into steps and you make continuous progress. Roadmap.md. This is another markdown file that you should have in your instructions. So create new file, roadmap.md, and this should include your roadmap, development roadmap. So here you should just type in like what you're focused on right now, what would be the next step, some other stuff you want to do in the future, and then like anytime you have more context, you just add it in. Okay, I tried X, but it did not work. Basically, this is good to know when you need to reference what state your startup or company or your project is in, right? Like the general state, not necessarily code related, but what's happening. Like maybe the client is putting pressure on you, or this feature just broke down, or there's a critical error in the backend that you would just put it here. That way, the AI has all the context that you have. I mean, essentially what we're trying to do with all these prompts and comments and instructions, we're trying to sync the context we have in our brain with cursor. The closer you can do it, the better cursor will be. If you're having trouble using AI, or if you're still like, coding with AI is not worth it, it doesn't work, it's not that good, it's because your prompts suck. You're not giving it enough context, or you're giving it the incorrect context. If you give it the wrong context, it's just going to be distracted, right? So the better you can sync it with your brain, the better it will be. And again, this year, especially in 2025, as we get O3, O3 Mini, Claude 4, this will become even more important. And yeah, if you start doing these best practices right now, you're just going to be like 2 to 3 times more productive than other people. And this is not even over-exaggerating, because again, in the future, humans will not even be allowed to touch code. There will literally be IDEs, such as Cursor, where if you go into the code base, be like, are you sure, human? Like, this is like, this is like AI stuff. This is complicated stuff. Like, are you sure you want to touch the code base? You're probably going to mess something up. Just like, leave it to O3, right? So get on these best practices right now. Include a roadmap MD file where you keep the general situation of the startup and like what we're focused on right now, what's the next focus. That way, the AI is on the same page as you are. Model knowledge cutoff. So many of you are aware of this, but do not internalize it when you're working with the models. And it's easy to forget, right? But every model inherently has a knowledge cutoff. They can only access the web with tools. Even ChatGPT and Perplexity. If you use Perplexity, and let's say you use Claude as a model, or whatever model you use, the model itself cannot browse the web. It's an external tool, right? Such as Twilio, Google Serper, whatever. Claude, inside of Cursor, unless you use the add web feature, right? Which again, you can use it. You can experiment with it. But personally, I think Perplexity is better. Unless you tag that feature, these models do not have web access. So anytime you mention like, okay, let's use the latest documentation, you just did a terrible mistake, because it doesn't know what the latest documentation is. It doesn't know what the latest version of Python or Next.js is. Why? Because it has a certain knowledge cutoff. And we can even ask it like, what is your knowledge cutoff? Answer in short. And it will tell us. And if anything happened after that, it will simply not know. So June 2023, this is terrible. This is like 18 months ago. Like that's like 18 years in the AI space. So you need to be aware of this, especially if you're working with anything that needs to be up to date. or anything like, there's an error and it's related to a new AI tool, maybe like DeepSeek, right? Are you aware of what DeepSeek is? I would be very surprised if it knows. You have to realize a lot of stuff that we are thinking of or that we know. Okay, so it does know some stuff. In that case, it lied about this. Early 2024. How does it know about early 24? Yeah, so this is weird, right? This is very weird. So I think Claude 3.5 Sonnet has probably like April 2024. I don't know why it said June though. You cannot even trust what it says. But that's my point. Check documentation. You can literally save yourself hours of pain if you just check like, let's say you're using Supabase or a database. Just check I made this mistake myself. That's why I'm saying it. If you watched my video, Building Vectel, Week in the Life of AI Startup Founder, if you watch this video, you'll see I got stuck on that issue for like a solid day when I just trusted the AI, where instead I should have checked Supabase documentation. Again, this is coding best practices, but it applies even more with AI because it's tempting to trust it, right? It speaks so confidently. That's the thing you have to realize. Even if the AI models are confident, it doesn't matter. That's what people call hallucination, but it's often just like bad prompting or like ignorance from the user. Anyways, make sure to check documentation often. Do not trust the AI models completely, especially if you're working with something that needs to be up to date and that changes often. All right, next thing. Have the AI tell you what to do. This is essential if you're a beginner. For example, right now, I'm very new to frontend. I don't even know how to debug frontend often, right? Like obviously you can do like F12 and pull up Chrome Dev Tools, but I don't even know what to look for exactly. That's why you ask the AI to tell you what to do. And you'll be surprised. AI is actually pretty good at this. So you describe what the error is and say, like, okay, I want to debug it using Chrome Web Tools or whatever debugging else. Like I say, you're doing backend. I want to debug it using the terminal, using Postman, curl, whatever. And make sure to be honest about your experience level. Like tell it, I'm a beginner when it comes to backend. I've never, debugged Fast API before. Tell me what to do. And it will give you clear instructions on how you can debug it so that you can give it the information it needs. So this is like, one abstraction layer away. Instead of you telling it what you know, oftentimes with more complex errors, this is not enough. If the error is like very complicated, right? Like let's say the error is like super simple, then yeah, maybe just describing what you know will solve it. But if the error is like insanely complicated and you know this, you're pretty screwed. That's why you should tell the AI, okay, I know this, but this is not enough. Tell me how I can give you more information. Let's use Chrome Web Dev Tools to debug this. How can I give you more info? And then, like, okay, you give it this. You try again, still enough. So, okay, you try again, boom. And suddenly, as you add in more context, the error is fixed. So have the AI tool give you instructions. Like tell it, what tests should I run so that I can give you relevant context. Like if you were a senior software developer working on this project, what type of context would you need to solve this error? Tell me step-by-step instructions on how I can give you that context. This works like magic, especially if you encounter a very complex error or some complex feature that it isn't enough telling it what you already know. All right, how should you add new features? MVP approach. Again, this is more just stuff I learned building startup and putting hundreds of hours into it. But anytime you want to add new feature, it is so tempting to just make it perfect. All of us, it's kind of easy to like sit down and like visualize the perfect app, right? Like I could easily brainstorm 100 things I should add into Vectel to make it better. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is actually implementing it. And even the hardest, like what's even harder than implementing it is working on the right thing. This is what makes Elon Musk so effective. He can identify what is the true bottleneck in his business and work on that exclusively. And the moment that is fixed, he reevaluates, okay, what is the next bottleneck? And for him, maybe he switches to working on a different company, but hopefully you don't have multiple companies because you shouldn't be distracted and you are not Elon Musk. You should have one main project and you should be working on that. So identifying what is the MVP of this new feature, right? Like as I said, I'm adding nodes into Vectel and it's so easy to just like think of the perfect implementation of that. By the way, again, it's coming tomorrow, so be excited for that if you're a Vectel user. But what's harder is about, okay, sitting down is like, what is the MVP? Which of the features would get me the 80-20, right? Like 80% of the outcomes for 20% of the effort. What is the minimal viable product of this feature? Because most parts of the feature are not needed. And this is like very hard to see at the start, so you need to do this in 2 stages. You need to do this at the beginning, where you're like brainstorming the feature. You literally like you brain dump all the stuff you would like to have in the feature. Maybe I can show you even what that looks like for Vectel. This is what the MVP looked like after I brainstormed a bunch of stuff. And what's crazy about this is that even this I decided to cut out. Literally, this was all that's needed for the MVP. And it's like, I literally had like probably 5 times this amount of ideas. But again, that's not the hard part. The hard part is narrowing it down. What do the users need? What is the core feature of this new change? Like what is really the core part of this feature? What would solve the problem, right? And once you start building, you'll realize, oh, even this is not needed. So you need to do this in 2 stages. First, at the beginning, and then next one after you have a few hours of building it, and you see like, okay, this is what it looks like. Maybe I don't even need this. And what's crazy is that I even had like a beautiful V0 front-end design for this. See, I literally even had the full feature designed, and I spent like multiple hours on this. See, this is version 30. This is 30 versions, and I even had like separate V0 chats with different designs. Then I just decided not to do it. And this is the real hard part about building a startup. And not necessarily building a startup, but like running a business and scaling a business fast. Identifying what matters and what doesn't matter. Most of you are working on things that doesn't matter. And I know it sounds like harsh and sounds brutal, but it's true. Either you're working on things that don't matter, or you could be doing stuff that has much higher leverage. For example, in a different industry, right? That's growing instead of shrinking. But you have to apply the same logic for the MVP. So anytime you're adding a new feature, sit down and say like, okay, I've brainstormed all the exciting new things. Let's calm down. What is the MVP? And this becomes especially useful once you start working with Cursor, because Cursor will just do what you say. It will not correct you. It will not course correct you. It will not be like, okay, David, calm down. Is it really part of the MVP? Again, maybe in a year where the AI models are smarter and have more context, they can do that. But I don't think so, because anytime they always follow your instruction. Because if you give it the wrong instruction, they'll just follow it, right? Obviously, if you say like, okay, help me, do something very illegal, then it will not follow the instructions. Or like something harmful to your health, it will not help you do that. But we're not talking about these extreme scenarios. We're talking about these non-obvious changes where it could be like a subtle intuition or instinct or like a matter of taste where do I develop this feature or do I add this feature to my startup? And one of them could make your startup go viral. The other could, piss off your users and ruin your startup. And the AI model will not know because it will be up to you, the user, what you instructed. So this is super important because if you don't do this, the AI model will happily help you introduce all of the bad features that will ruin your startup. It will happily help you spend 2 weeks on a feature that should have taken 2 days. It will gladly do that because it's following your instructions. Okay, do not make AI make the big decisions. This is, again, you cannot trust the AI completely. You have to stay in charge of the project. You have to have the vision. You need to know, okay, should we split this into multiple files or should this be like, should this be kept in a single file? You can let the AI make simple decisions such as, how do we structure this function? Or like which package do we use? But even that, I wouldn't even trust it. Like the bigger the decision, the less you should trust the AI. So trust it on like how to structure, variables and name variables and functions, whatever, that's fine. But if you're saying like, how do we, what design principles we follow in the front end? No way. Or like what tech stack you use? Man, the bigger the decision, the less you should trust AI. All right, when do you use other tools, right? Like I showed you V0, I showed you Claude. When should you use Cursor? When should you use something else like Lovable, Bold? Honestly, you can use Cursor for basically everything. Even front-end design, I still use Cursor, but I still design the first version in V0. That's at least I found like the best principle. Again, I already explained how to use Claude and when to use that. But speaking of like other tools like Lovable, Bold, Lovable I would actually use to design like the first version of the backend and database. If you have no experience with Supabase, Lovable has amazing integration with Supabase. So it's really impressive what they did. But again, you need to understand what's happening. If you just let the AI design the Supabase DB and you have no idea what tables you have, what RLS policies, what columns the tables have, like, oh my God. You might be able to build something impressive very fast, but you will run into so much pain and you will get stuck and you will just quit. I mean, that's the brutal point. That's the brutal truth. If you let the AI run without understanding what's happening, you will run into so many technical debt. You will accumulate so much technical debt that sooner or later you will quit. Any tool you use, you have to make sure you understand what's happening. And that's the danger with these like super cracked tools that can give you like amazing looking MVPs really fast. Sure, you can use Bolt, and in 3 or 4 prompts, you can have a pretty solid website that you can send to a client and, you know, impress him. But once the client starts, you know, demanding like some details, some customizations that require you to get your hands dirty and go into, you know, the backend and actually take it from Bolt, take it into Cursor and start doing some stuff yourself, good luck with that. So I would honestly stick to using Cursor and Claude. Again, V0 for the initial design, but once you're happy with the design, try to take it into Cursor as soon as possible. Do not like build any functionality on, like, just connect it with your code base as soon as possible. Reduce, again, you should develop an internal radar of technical debt. Anytime a technical debt is accumulating, you should be like panicking. I was like, oh my God, I don't really know what's going on. Huge red alarm. That's a danger zone. You should ask the AI to explain what's going on and to say like, pause, okay, I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna integrate it with the Cursor. I'm gonna make sure it works with my current code. I'm gonna run a bunch of tests, reduce the technical debt. I'm gonna, you know, understand what's happening, push to GitHub once it works, and then you can add in more stuff. So this is more of like a feeling or like an internal radar you have to develop. But these other tools, you can really accumulate a lot of technical debt very quickly. So that's why it's dangerous. Again, cursor ignore, we already touched on that. So that's it. This has been over 400 hours of cursor lessons in a single video. If you found it valuable, make sure to subscribe. And again, go to vector.ai because this is the future of productivity. This is the world's first AI-powered productivity app that actually saves you time. So it's literally improving every other day. Like I'm shipping updates left and right, and I'm also hiring a developer. So once I have a developer, the amount of updates is only going to speed up. And if you want to be one of the OGs, one of the people that were on the start of something big, make sure to give it a shot. I promise you won't regret it. With that being said, thank you guys for watching and have a wonderful, productive week. Peace.